Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Wernick, Rabbi Wernick, one of the rabbis of Beit Tzedek Congregation in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Rabbi David Steinhardt from B'nai Torah Congregation in Boca Raton, Florida. And you are joining us for Conversations Over Coffee, my weekly video blog, talking about interesting things with interesting people. Of course, as the host, I'm the one who gets to decide what's interesting. If you stick around to watch it, then I guess you've agreed. If not, we'll see you next time. David, it's so good to see you. First of all, how are you doing?
It's good to see you, and I thank you for inviting me to onto your show. I'm probably doing not too unlike how you're doing, but let me define it for myself. There are two different aspects when I look at that question. The first aspect is that I feel in some ways that this is what I've worked almost 39 years in the rabbinate at, so that I feel gratified in a sense that I developed the skills to be able to deal with a crisis and to be able to deal with the multi aspects of this crisis. And so in that way, I feel fortified, I think that's good. This is personally. The other aspect of it is that I am, and we spoke a little bit before we opened up here. My heart is really broken by the amount of pain that we have seen. There has been more death than I've ever experienced in a given year in the community. More people who are truly needy. I have been aware of 5 suicides since November 1st. And as I said to you earlier, I didn't hear of 5 suicides in the previous 28 years of my rabbinic career. So I feel that sadness and I feel that heaviness. And in the midst of all that, so I feel that that's all about being the rabbi, but then in the midst of it, it's also how do I, care for myself and my family in all of this? Because everything that everybody's feeling, you and I are feeling also. And we kind of go on, and there's a certain energy that drives us, we really want to be the best we can be at what we're called on to do. And then sometimes, you sit back and you realize this is really, really hard to do. So personally, I'm doing okay. My nature is one that's optimistic, but it's been very hard to retain that. And I've done I've been involved in certain self-care type activities, which have been really helpful too.
What are some of the self-care things that you've been doing? I mean, I think that's so important. One of the reasons why I know I went into the rabbinate is, just this love of other people and wanting to help. And also in my own origin stories, having loss at an early age, and knowing that it was a Jewish community that took Jewish values seriously, that helped navigate me through that challenging time in my own life. So it's, for me, very much, it's about paying it forward every day.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do that, it's like I feel all the tension, like when it gets overwhelming, like it is now, as you said, right, with so much death and so much anxiety and so much loneliness and so much pain. I carry it here on my shoulder, like literally, I carry it in my shoulder right here.
Yeah.
What do you do?
You're speaking to a
keep...
guy who has had 3 back surgeries. So
yeah.
As a function of having had my first back surgery, I started to swim after I was done with the physical therapy initially. So I've been swimming more than and that's one of the reasons that I say the Kadosh Baruch Hu brought me to Florida. So, because I can swim outside every day. And so I've been swimming a lot, and that exercise is really, really helpful. During our rabbinical school years, the year we spent in Yerushalayim, I actually, at that time, took a TM class, and so I'm also a meditator. And so those are the 2 things that, those are 2 of the things that I do that really help me a lot. And I think, and I get a lot of love I have 3 adult kids and 5 grandchildren, and I get a lot of love from them and from Toby, my wife. And I think that love is perhaps the most important aspect of self-care.
I think that's definitely true. What I do is I ride my bike.
Mhm.
In Canada, swimming outdoors in the winter is called ice skating.
Yeah.
But I ride my bike. I have an indoor trainer that I put my bike on, and I've been using Zwift, which is one of these like game programs that helps track all your stats for growing as a cyclist. And I'm actually training. I hope, God willing, in October to be able to go to Israel with the Ramah Israel bike ride and hike to raise money for their special needs program. So you look at, if you're a cyclist, you look at the Ramah program, which is all in the north. It's like 2,000 to 3,000 feet of climbing for each ride. So I'm like, that's what I'm working on.
I'm familiar with it. God bless you.
Well, it's been a good goal for me because I've been working on losing weight too, and that's how I've been managing to keep my own sanity.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you think you've learned in this last year leading a congregation during COVID?
One thing for sure is that isolation kills people. That I mean that, metaphorically and physically, and that human beings were created to live in community. It may be something that I've realized, from the early times in the rabbinate, but it has certainly been brought home. And watching the people in my community who have served as volunteers, calling the people who they know and we know are alone, has been really gratifying. It's also with the increase in deaths. I know that they're not all from COVID for sure, but I think that a lot of the things people suffer from become a lot worse when they're isolated. So I think the most important lesson is the power of community. I might have been able to say that before COVID, but now I know it. And the fact, we went over a year ago now, we brought everything online. We did everything virtually. We started our Zoom services immediately. And knowing what that has meant for our people has been really beautiful. And it has allowed people to connect with each other. It's actually by doing something that we would not have done halachically beforehand. I think we've saved Shabbos for the community too. So we have a large gathering, as you know, on both Erev Shabbat and Shabbat morning, and on Zoom, and people get to see each other, and people get to relate to each other, and people get to daven together and to hear our chazan and hear the words of our rabbis. And I think that's community, and then it's also about the power of Shabbos and Shabbat and the passage of time. So I've been talking a lot lately about the meaning of time in our lives and the notion of the sanctification of time. And there's a long period here where every day seemed like every other day, but Shabbat separated us in a way that was much more profound than when I would be going into the shul every day. So that's another aspect. So we have community and we have time in Torah. Another lesson, and again, it's something as a rabbi we speak about and we know intellectually, but truly felt the fact that we don't have much control. And so whereas, as we move along in life, there are periods in life, especially when we're like young adults until we reach the latter stages of whatever middle age is, we may think we control just about everything. And this pandemic has taught us that we don't have much control. We didn't know anything in the beginning. We had to be able to sit in a place of real uncertainty and with the knowledge that we didn't know. So learning to live with that kind of uncertainty, I think, is an indication of spiritual wisdom. And the place where you go with that spiritual uncertainty for people of faith is to God. The other piece of that, in terms of that turning to God, has to do with going back to the loneliness issue. And so I spoke about loneliness in relation to community. But the truth is that we all as we know, come into this world alone, and we leave the world alone. And in between all of that, we busy ourselves with our activities and our relationships. But at the end of the day, each one of us lives solitary lives internally. And people who have that sense of faith, and people who walk with God. And sometimes it's hard to find that God to walk with, but that's a source of strength. Those are some of the things. There's also environmental, we could talk about that too, environmental things that I feel like I've learned, and economic things that I feel like I've learned, and certainly political things. Because as you know, in the United States, I don't know if you heard this, but we had an election this year. And I think there was a lot to learn about that election, and particularly the implications of the issues in relation to COVID. Yeah. You heard we had an election?
I heard you had an election. I think the whole world heard there was an election.
Thank God it's over, right?
I'm still an American citizen, although I am in the process of applying for permanent residency. But it's amazing to me how well informed Canadians are about American politics. In some ways, I find even more informed than Americans are.
Can I say something about that, Steve? I sensed, as you know, we have a lot of Canadians that are part of our community, snowbirds, and now snowbirds who are up north also. A lot of people from Ottawa and Montreal, Toronto, even Saskatchewan or Saskatoon. Yeah, that's in Saskatchewan.
That's in Saskatchewan.
Yeah. So what I found about the Canadians is that they not only were really knowledgeable about American politics, but there was a deep concern for what was happening here. There was a realization of the interdependence of our two countries. There was a great sensitivity to the troubles that we were facing, the problems of so many of our citizens. And it was really, it was quite beautiful, but they were very tuned into this.
And very aware of the leadership role that the United States plays in the world. Yeah. Not just the connection with Canada specifically, but also, just dealing with all global issues that the United States, really has long coattails. And when it plays an active role in the world stage, certainly Western democracies understand that as being beneficial to them. I want to talk a little bit about those snowbirds. I mean, one of the reasons why we're having this conversation, one of the reasons why we did a joint concert recently, and that even just yesterday, that Cantor Fishman and Rabbi Friar Bodson did a program. One of the things that we were concerned about here was what we termed the morning Florida, right? That people who for decades have, essentially developed additional communities and relationships and lives in Florida. This would be the first time that they would not be able to go. Not only just the challenges of there are all sorts of levels of challenges. One is that when it's cold here, it's like you tend not to go out. Especially if you're an older person, it becomes a little bit more dangerous with ice and snow and so forth and so on. But also just, the missing of their lives, and also the shul. B'nai Torah is a central element for their experience. And so we wanted to, intentionally have some connections between Bet Tzedek and B'nai Torah. What are some of the things that you're hearing from the snowbirds? Are there ways other than they're tuning in for services and programs that they're interacting and engaging with you?
Well, they come, certainly they take advantage. Everyone that's a part of our community, and our snowbirds are a part of our community, do take advantage of all of our learning opportunities, special programming, the interviews we do, our film series. There's so much, we offer so much, and so there's something to do regularly. So, they're a part of that. And then these relationships developed around the synagogue, and I want to talk about that in a second as to what makes it unique here. Because look, every community, that every rabbi says, my community is very unique. And then they'll tell you what the unique aspects are. But there's a real demographic uniqueness to our place. None of the people who are on right now were born in this area, right? I'm sure when I moved to Boca, the president of the shul had been in town for less than 7 years. It's a place where everybody was a bit of an outsider, and it was a place where people came to settle and were looking for a place to root themselves. And so the shul became the place where they rooted themselves. And we weren't competing with all the other forces that you compete with normally. It was first and foremost, that place, that institution they identified with was B'nai Torah. And so the power of the shul became really, really strong and continues to be really strong. So for example, the Canadians, you have people, as I mentioned, we have people from all over Canada. And there's a certain identification that they have with themselves because they're from Canada or because they live in a particular neighborhood. But then they also have this identification because of B'nai Torah. And because B'nai Torah's reputation has grown such, then there's a self-selecting population here, which is, I will say, it's my dream, and it's every rabbi's dream of people who they move to a place because they want to be near a shul that reflects their religious ideology and the attachments that they want to have, et cetera. And so it has truly grown on itself in that way.
We have a question from Facebook. How has COVID affected our plans for reopening the shuls?
From the very beginning, plans about the shul, its being open or not, was very fluid and was totally dependent on the data and the scientific information and the data that was coming in. So right now, most of our older population is vaccinated. And we're beginning to talk about how we will open in stages. We're right now struggling a little bit with our early childhood program, which has been open since October with the knowledge, that kids are asymptomatic, but they can be spreaders. And we have an issue with a number of our teachers now having COVID. But we are talking about how we'll open, and we're going to do it in stages. And we'll do it with also trying to minimize the crowd for a while until we can truly be open to everybody. I don't know how you're not open, are you?
So we're open. The regulations now allow for up to 10 people in religious spaces. And we've been limiting that only to B'nai Mitzvah. Otherwise, we've been closed, and we've been doing, we don't use Zoom on Shabbat or Chagim. We've only been using a live stream for that, which is one way. Whereas we've been using Zoom for weekday minyanim and so forth. The reason we did that is we draw the line between the amount of personal manipulation that one has to make in order to access the live stream on Shabbat. It is possible to set up your computer, and when the live stream starts, it'll automatically reboot the computer and start. You don't have to do anything during the course of Shabbat for that. And we have non-Jewish staff that are basically running all the technology and whatnot. In terms of the reopening, we just received word that I think beginning today, religious institutions are allowed to have up to 15% occupancy and up to 50 people outside, social distance and with masks. Now, our sanctuary has permanent seating for 2,500. So if we were to do 15% in there, we're talking about 750 people. We're not doing that. The chapel has occupancy of about 200, 220. So that would be 30 to 35 occupancy in the chapel. And we're going to be partnering with the day school that is in our facility for one of the tents outside. So we're going to start running simultaneous minyanim on the live stream in Zoom and outside. is what we're going to start with. And we're going to start with smaller numbers and see what happens and so forth. The vaccination here has been slow, partly due to not having, or a real lag time in the supply chain. The United States has not been sharing its vaccines, has been keeping it for itself. So Canada has been getting the vaccines primarily from Europe and from India. And there was a delay in the European production for about 4 to 6 weeks. Now it seems like it's arriving in more numbers. And they're vaccinating 80-year-olds and frontline workers. And then the AstraZeneca has been approved right now only for 60 to 65-year-olds. So the vaccinations are beginning to go into arms. Everybody expects it's going to pick up the pace as more supply arrives. But it's been very disappointing, what appears to be a lack of planning in the interim time, so that when the vaccines did arrive, they could get here, so that more people could be vaccinated and we could have more people together. That's the Canadian frustration, I suppose, in what's happening.
The use of Zoom has been so successful for us that now we have people doing the research in ways that we will be able to continue to Zoom after the pandemic is over. So I talked about stages of return, but the stages of return will include remaining virtual in one way or another so that the connections can remain. The other advantage we have right now, you talked about tents, is that we've had some really wonderful weather and we expect a few more weeks before it gets hot. So I think Kabbalat Shabbat, we're going to do this combination, outdoor Kabbalat Shabbat and Zoom. But again, we're not quite ready to do it yet because of some of the other issues with the virus having shown up in our youngest population.
There's more questions coming in about how we're going to decide who can attend first. We're working that out. Right now it's a registration system and it's first come, first serve. We might at some point insist that it's only people that are vaccinated. I just don't know the answer to that question yet for Beth Tzedek. I would say also that, I think you're right. The future is going to continue to be with live streaming and Zoom. There's just, that trend was happening already. The pandemic made it a necessity. And so it's just going forward. And just to share, one story on that. I buried a couple of weeks ago an older person who died of complications from COVID, wasn't in the best of health anyway, was 90 some years old. COVID took his life. But if it wasn't COVID, it would have been something else. Alzheimer's. But the family shared with me that last Rosh Hashanah, because we were live streaming, they bought a big screen TV and put it in his room. And something that they hadn't seen him do in a long time. When the service was, when the cantor was singing and the choir was singing, he was singing along. And they told me that when he got to Shema V'Ahavta, he sat up taller in his bed and belted it out. That really, something in his mind, in his memory, he connected with the Rosh Hashanah davening service. And then also, when he got tired, he took a nap for 20 minutes, he got up and then joined the service again. And it was just a real beautiful story of, what his son said to me is that, without that, he never would have been at service again. We never would have had that experience. And it got him to thinking, and of course, we've heard this many times over, and not even just people from Alzheimer's that are having the memory come back, but just people that are older and can't get out anyway, even before COVID, or people that live long distances and it's a schlep really to get in, or their children are far away and they want to share in it. Having the live stream connected people again in a way that they hadn't been connected for many, many years. And I, you know, you hear those stories and I'm thinking, you know, this too is a mitzvah. And it's a mitzvah that we can't ignore, that we have the technology to do. And I just can't imagine that Chazal, that our ancestors, if they had this kind of technology and they knew the way in which it could connect people to God and to community for people that needed it, that they wouldn't use it.
Yeah, we could talk both about the advantages and disadvantages of this, and there are clearly both. But what you mentioned about the elderly, there have been aspects of it that have been very appealing to people who are middle-aged and younger too. Friday nights, I know, you know, during the season, to come to shul to come to a 6 o'clock Kabbalat Shabbat service means preparation in terms of getting dressed, and driving during a highly trafficked time, because we're not an urban synagogue, and then being in shul and then driving home, and it's a much larger time commitment, and this allows for a more focused event. Something else people said to me is they felt like they're in the front row. You know, that on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, when you have almost 1,800, 2,000 people in our sanctuary, which, as you know, is like an airplane hangar. It goes so far back, and so, you know, they're specks in my eyes, and I'm a speck in their eye, and you felt like you could really relate more closely to people. I am one of three, and 3 children in my own family. I have 2 older sisters. Both of them said it was their first time ever going to Senate services when they began and staying until the end. They wouldn't do that. And when you sit in the shul, there's so many distractions, and the woman in front of you has such a big hat, and the person to the left of you, their perfume is too strong, and everyone's talking, etc. So it allowed for a more...
For me, the person 10 rows back, the perfume is too strong.
So it allows for a more kind of personal experience there too, yeah, which is really nice. I see Dvara wrote in the chat room that, you know, that we have a responsibility to be there for our people, not just that our people come here to us. And so when new technologies develop, the way we can integrate them and still do it in an authentic Jewish way, and I know shuls differ in terms of how they define that. I think that's very, very important also with all this. On the other hand, you don't hear people singing together. Right. And that voice of people singing together is so, so powerful. In our show, you know, and probably your show also, I know you have a great history of wonderful music. Everyone's standing and singing Eitz Chaim He together. Every week it's transcendent for me. It's unbelievable. And it's the language, it's the liturgy, but it's also the voices together. So there's something about being together that you would miss. We do have something to learn from those televangelists. And as so much of it is kind of a cheapened form of religion, yet there's something in it that's spiritually nourishing to many people. And so we have to find that which is spiritually nourishing and meaningful.
Well, I think that one doesn't have to necessarily agree with the content to learn from the production.
Their productions,
right? The way in which you engage both the live audience and a stream or a televised audience. We reached out to people in the congregation who are actually in the sports world and who direct the Toronto Sports Network, the hockey games that are in person and televised. And we're asking exactly that question: is what can we learn from a production in terms of how do you engage a live audience as well as a TV audience? And you're right, the thing that we're all missing, and certainly I know for me and our team, and it sounds like for you and your team as well, just, you know, that sense of being together, hearing the voices. There's an energy. Even I find when I give a Devar Torah, like you can tell when you're giving your sermon, you can tell when people are with you, and you can tell when they're not. And it's infinitely harder through a camera to feel where people are and whether or not you're connecting with them. So I miss that a lot.
Right. Excuse me. We have a fellow that naps on Friday night, and his virtual screen is at the Kotel, and it's like the ultimate in Shabbat Menucha. There he is. He's in listening to the service, and he's sleeping, and the kotel is behind him.
Well, I think that's great. He sleeps in shul and he sleeps virtually in shul too. Last word, Rabbi.
Yeah.
What's your last word for us today?
You just caught me. I'll come up with it, but I for some reason I thought we were going to 1:30, so I wasn't in a wrap.
Oh no, so
okay.
Sorry.
Oh, okay, fine. No, my last.
I'll share a word, and I'll give you some time to.
Let's continue this relationship, right? We learn from each other, and we grow from each other, and so that has been really nice. And I think without clergy involvement, there's been a relationship between our shuls for a long time. I remember when the flats first came down to B'nai Torah, and we shared a chazan over the years, and so I know a lot about your shul, and a lot. You've been with us about our shul, so we should continue to do that. But the other thing is, let us allow this format to continue to open up our communities and give more and more people voices, and enable us to be able to articulate both our message and bring hope and spirit to everybody.
Yeah, I think that's one of the potential benefits for the future is that we can create joint programming without having to necessarily be in the same place at the same time. Though I look forward to the point where that's part and parcel of what we're doing, but that we're also sharing the same space and sharing times together.
One of the things, Steve, if you don't mind, I've been really impressed at how many people are seriously engaged with Jewish learning. And I am certain that many more people are learning from the scholars from JTS and from the Hartman Institute and the people provided by other Jewish organizations and shuls all over the country, all over the world. And it's really beautiful. We are a people who learn, and to see the numbers learning is fantastic.
Well, that's something that you and I can look at doing. We can look at co-teaching something together, and to bring our communities and ourselves together in that way as well. But you're right. I mean, and it's also, Beth Tzedek in particular is one of its core identities is that this is a learning community, and the people here take Jewish learning very seriously, and to be able to offer, as our movement has through the scholar stream of JTS, the Ziegler, the RA, and USTJ, I think that's been a real benefit, as well as other learning opportunities like the conservative yeshiva as well. Okay, thank you, David, so much for your partnership, for your friendship, for the work that you do for your community, for the Jewish people. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Conversations Over Coffee. We're glad that you were here. For ongoing activities to engage spiritually with Beth Tzedek, even though we're still physically apart, but Im Yirtzeh Hashem, God willing, soon we'll be able to be together in actual person-to-person community. See us online, www.beth-tzedek.tz, that's the Canadian in me, tzedec.org. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot
for the connection.